Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Death by Adaptation podcast, a bi-weekly book club where we choose one classic book and compare and contrast it against its cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolò Grasso, and today I'm joined by a good friend of the podcast, good friend in general, the main host and creator of the Uncut Gems pod, Jakub Flasz. How are you doing, Jakub?
Oh, I'm the real Douglas Quaid.
You are not you. You
You're
are
me.
me. No shit.
No shit. Come on, don't bullshit me.
Oh, we're starting in hot already with the sweet quotes because, of course, today we're talking about a very special movie, more so than a very special book. But I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to have you here, Jakub. But before we dive into this week's subject, as always, if you're on YouTube, on Spotify, or Apple, or your microwave machine, wherever you're listening to this podcast, remember to subscribe, to follow, to leave a like, thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever you can do. If you can do it, please do it. Consider supporting us, sharing the show and everything, and we hope you enjoy this conversation. And now, strap in, boys, because today we're talking about We Can Remember It For You Wholesale, aka Total Recall.
Some of our options.
No options.
Whatever you say. Could I ask you just one question, though? What is it that is exactly the same about every single vacation you have ever taken?
I give up.
You. You're the same. No matter where you go, there you are. It's always the same old you. Let me suggest that you take a vacation from yourself. And I know, it sounds wild. It is the latest thing in travel. We call it the ego trip.
No, I'm not interested in that.
You're gonna love this, Doug. We offer you a choice of alternate identities during your trip. Face it, why go to Mars as a tourist when you can go as a playboy or a famous jock or...
Secret agent. How much is that?
Let me tantalize you. You are a top operative, back under deep cover on your most important mission. People are trying to kill you left and right. You meet this beautiful, exotic woman.
Come on.
I don't want to spoil it for you, Doug, but you rest assured, by the time the trip is over, you get the girl, kill the bad guys, and save the entire planet. Now, you tell me, isn't that worth a measly 300 credits?
We Can Remember It For You Wholesale is a short story by famed sci-fi novelist Philip K. Dick. Philip K. Dick, who most of you probably know from having written the original short story for Blade Runner, or the original short story for Minority Report, or even for one of the Uncut Gems episodes that we did back in August for Paycheck, the John Woo classic. the finest of movies.
Tune in and find out.
Jesus. But today we're talking about this 1966 story, short story. If you've watched the movie, and if you're here, you likely have watched the movie, but you probably haven't read this. Jakub, why don't you share with the listeners what this story is about? Because I have things to say, but I'm curious to hear your
I
version
don't
of
know
the
what this
facts.
story is what this story is about actually when you think about it. I mean, at this point, I don't even like. I think this is gonna be a bit perverse if we spend more time talking about this story than it takes to read it.
Pretty much, honestly.
I mean, on Uncut Gems, I realized that we frequently just talk about a movie for longer than it takes to watch it. But I think you're excused because movies are like 2.5 hours long at best. Well, unless you're into some really kinky shit from the Philippines, like
Oh
I can't
my.
remember what Love Diaz, right?
Once
Or
upon a
like I
time
don't
in
know, Satan
Anatolia.
Tango or whatever,
Yeah.
Bellatar, right? Anyway, so I read this, and I kid you not, I read it on the toilet.
In one sitting.
Yeah, because it's 12 pages. Like it's not long, right? So I mean, I was there longer than I was supposed to, right? Because I finished what I had to do, and because recently it's all. I mean, here's Jakub and his bowel movement metaphors. Like just
It's a running
like
thread.
just it's a running theme. Like it's your bingo card. Like Uncut Gems represent. Like this is what you're tuning in for. Like if you see my name in there, you'll know you'll get an update on how my poops are.
We
Like
should
when
have a
when you have
jingle at this point.
yeah,
Just
it's like if you eat enough protein and fiber, things are nice and smooth and well
yeah.
regimented. Very frequent, but
It's healthy, it's good for you.
It's one
It's how
and
it's
done.
supposed to be.
So we essentially end up just going there, 2 minutes, just Operation Dumbo drop, and then you sit there to read, right? Just to have a peace of mind, because anyone who has kids will know that like your toilet time is your holiday, essentially, right? Like it's just no one bothers you.
Just
Uh,
a bit of safety.
yes, it is. Yeah. So I essentially read it on the can, right? And then I read it, and I was just thinking to myself, Wow, I think this. I mean, I'll preface this way. Recently, when I decided, so whenever I finish reading a book, I go through a story or two, and I want to kind of go through Philip K. Dick's short stories,
Hmm.
Edgar Allan Poe's, and H.P. Lovecraft. So I'll
Nice,
just
yeah.
do one Dick, one Lovecraft, one Poe, and then I'll just and so as so much so to just cleanse the palate, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know. I finished reading, I don't know, Andy Weir's Artemis, and I just read a few short stories, and then I started reading Jaws, and then I started a new job, and my reading kind of just schedule kind of got a little bit messed up, so
Mm,
I'm still reading Jaws. But anyway,
give it time.
I'm not here to moan about my personal life, even though I just gave you an update on how my poos are going.
They
uh,
love it. The listeners love it.
I hope so, because otherwise this is just like this is just the two of us because everyone switched off. Anyway, um, so I've been kind of just, let's just say, conditioning myself to reading Philip K. Dick's short stories, and most of them are not that great. The ones I've read, and
Which one
this one is
have you
no
read? Actually, I'm curious.
Oh, let me just pull up my Goodreads. Because thanks to your recommendation, I started my Goodreads account so I can just star rate all this crap that I read.
Yes, it's the only
Um,
place where I still use star ratings because otherwise,
I read a few. So, how do I do this? My books, read. So I read. Okay, so I've got. We can remember it for your wholesale. I've got Rug. I've got Stability, and Paycheck. I think this is how I started. So yeah, I've got a
mhm.
few, right? So I've got a few under my belt. I still have like hundreds to go because I think I'm slowly going through this 5-volume set of his collected short stories, and there's a lot.
Especially because they're actually short stories. Like I'm still reading the Books of Blood by Clive Barker, but those are like 60 pages long. They're almost novellas or novelettes.
Yeah, I
You
think
could
so. Yeah,
say.
yeah, yeah. It's a bit different. Yeah. So
K
they
Dig
are
is like 20
essentially.
20 pages. That's it.
So it's kind of hard to. I mean, it's kind of hard to talk about them as well, and then just think about what you say, what you think about them, because they're essentially like like trying to have a conversation about a one-liner stand-up comedy joke, right? Like it's or just like short films in general, for instance, they have a similar problem with me because they're most this is mostly just a gimmick. Like there's the sort of setup and a pun, right? And I think for the ones I've read so far, maybe some of them like Rogue is a little bit more sort of experimental, as in there's it's just a scene from this sort of weird world that you don't quite know what's happening.
Hmm.
But mostly there are still these little scenes. It's not like a self-compressed novel to just a 12-page long. It's still like a little bit of a snippet of something uh, that centers around this gimmick that he will probably just he dreamt up at one point. And this one is about this sort of guy who Douglas Quayle, by the way. This is the stupidest name in the world.
Douglas Quayle, like yeah,
Jesus.
one of many differences.
Who just thinks, I think he thinks, I'd love to do something with my life, go to Mars. I don't know, I can't afford it, can I just go to this place that just sells you memories, which is, and then I think this whole concept is just, well, um if are your memories a proof that something happened, or are your memories a reality of some kind? Does it mean that, I don't know, if you think that what you think you're experiencing, is this real, or is this just a memory, or is this
Hmm.
just a fantasy? Are you just sitting on a bench, just slobbering, just while you just, I don't know.
A massive
And
seizure awaiting death.
I suppose there's this sort of like a recursive sort of loop in there, because you could just think there's or maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. And I think that's the gimmick, or just how do you know? And
Mhm.
then the story ends, and you wipe, and then you go. So,
Flush it down the toilet. It's like I'm done.
flush it down. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like I read this, and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm happy that if I had read this as someone who has never seen any of the films that are sort of quote unquote inspired by it, I wouldn't be able to tell you the first thing about it. It's just so unmemorable. It just hurts. Like you forget you forget it as it's happening. It's just so I don't think I have much to say about it apart from the fact it's essentially a collection of I think 3 scenes, and the sort of and the sort of the big sort of gimmick at the end. Oh, is this real or is it not? I don't know. Oh,
Ambiguity.
yeah.
We love
So
ambiguity. Um,
yeah, it's me and
yeah. I don't know if it's a hot take. Like we briefly discussed this off mic, but I agree. I don't like Philip K. Dick. It's one of those writers. To be honest, like I've said it countless of times by now on various podcasts, but I'm just not a sci-fi guy. Just sci-fi. There are there are some stories and some movies and books that work for me, but the more standard type of sci-fi, the type that Philip K. Dick writes, just doesn't appeal to me that much. I was reading this story and I was just kind of like, what's the point? What's the point? And I want to kind of appreciate what he's trying to do with this because he kind of reminded me a lot of the Paycheck short story, but also kind of like,
Mhm.
what he wrote with Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Like he's always questioning reality. What is real? What is fake? And what makes someone human? What makes you you? What elements? And it's all about in the case of we can remember it for you wholesale. Like all these names are so long, all these titles. He is trying to kind of balance things out with like are you yourself, like the person that you are living as, or are you just a construct of all the memories that built up over the years? But it's a 20-page short story that has no room to develop. There's no character development. There's no way to get to know Douglas Quayle. There's no way.
Best name.
Just rolls off the tongue, so lovely. It gets to a point at the end where it almost borders on silliness, and I don't know honestly if Philip K. Dick had a self-aware element to his writing. But there's this whole thing of like, they look at his memories, and when he was a child, a little Quail was in contact with aliens, and they liked him so much they were like, we will not invade Earth as long as you're alive. That's all right. And that's his kind of the fantasy that Douglas Quayle has of his childhood, but then turns out it's actually real.
Or
Maybe,
is it?
maybe is it? And I'm just standing there and thinking like, I don't care. I don't know. What do you feel about that? Just this whole like, what's the point, Philip? What's the point? You're not It feels like it's more about, even with the other stories, like even when for Minority Report, I don't remember the title of the story, but it's very much like, ooh, I have a cool idea for like this
Mhm.
sci-fi thing. Oh, what if you can just, people can implant memories into your brain, make you believe that you actually experienced something, even though you never did anything. You just sat in a chair. Isn't
Mhm.
it cool? It's like, oh yeah, sure. And then he just writes a short story to kind of justify that. It's like, yeah, it's done. It just
You know,
exists now.
I see. This is me shitting on Philip K. Dick again, but
Do
I
it.
feel like the late night conversation when he came up with this, probably like over like I don't know, like a glass of whiskey and smoking cigars in these sort of like smoky sort of rooms somewhere, I don't know, in the middle of nowhere in New York or Chicago or wherever the hell he lived.
Mhm.
Like the conversation where I would assume this would come out. I mean, I don't want to live in a world where he sits on a sofa and and just conjures it out of thin air, right? I want to think that because this is essentially this story is a distillation of a conversation that two 20 somethings will have in a student halls, like these two, like, hey man, would it be cool if you could implant someone's memories? Yeah, and then what if these memories are like is this what makes you you? This is your identity. And how do we know if we're here? How do you how do we know if what's real is really real? What if it's all a dream, man? And they go like, that's some good shit, man. Like this is that kind of conversation I would assume
Oh
this
yes.
concept comes out of. So
We're very high.
I live in a world where I want to live in a world where this conversation is. I think the conversation alone is more interesting than the story that he can just. I'm gonna write it down. Like, no, Phil, don't write anything down. Just leave it there. Like, just this is fun, just to have a bit of a chat about, and then just let's go about our day.
He
So,
manifested it.
because if you think about it, talking about the concept of, were these aliens real or not, and then does it really matter, or does it matter to Douglas Quayle, is more interesting than actually reading it.
Yeah. But that's everything that's not present in the actual text.
Yeah,
It's almost like he doesn't care. Which, fair enough, it is a short story. It's not a novel. But even then, could
the
have expanded it.
short stories are weird, by the way, because at least for me, because they're very often kind of sort of like, well, it's either like a one-liner, as in like a setup and a pun,
Hmm.
or it's a gimmick, or it's an exercise. Like, it's a scene where someone will have an idea, which is like, or like some short story writers are great. Like, if you read anything, here's me just like Jakub Bingo Hemingway, right? If you read any Hemingway short story,
Bingo.
they're great because they're sort of these weird self-contained little dramas that you could expand into something bigger, but you don't necessarily have to,
Hmm.
right? But they just live and breathe, and they have a pulse, and then so they don't look like exercises. They look like someone had a, I don't know, walked down the street and looked at someone, and then imagined that they have a life, and then just wrote a snippet of it, and that's it. And then and left it for you to figure out the rest, and then you can just live in a world like, I think The Killers is a good one. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's essentially 3 pages long, just a dialogue.
The one that they've adapted like 5 times. That
Yes.
killers. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think
The two
it's
killers that go find the man.
Yes, the two killers go and find the guy, and then you just and yeah. So it's essentially I think that it's essentially a scene where a guy gets woken up by a guy who says to him that there are these two killers after him. That's it. That's all. That's the short story, and the rest you can build around it, right? And then Robert Schudmack
Oh,
basically just built a whole film around it, and then
so good.
what's his face, Lee Marvin's in another
That's
adaptation of it.
also right.
Yeah. So
Mm.
these are great short stories, but this is essentially, for me, this is a gimmick. Like, this is a sort of like a way of writing down this sort of cool idea about, like, what if our identity is our memories, and then what if none of it's real? This is essentially just like I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of these sort of like little uh like nuggets of inspiration for the Wachowskis to do the Matrix, or
Ooh,
for
Inception, Christopher Nolan.
Inception, or like Fassbinder's World on a Wire, or something like this. Because I suppose it's
I
from,
can see that.
when was it released? Like in the
66.
50s, 66, right?
66.
So it kind of makes sense to me. But yet, other than that, when you actually think about what what the story has to say, not much does it have to say. Like, you can have a conversation based on just like leave the story to the side, and then just have a conversation about memories and identity, and then just completely forget that Philip K. Dick once got high and then just had a conversation with his friend, or I should hope.
Yeah, I honestly I really like short stories. Maybe it's the short filmmaker in me as well that kind of likes this type of format. But you mentioned one of my favorite authors. You mentioned him earlier is Edgar Allan Poe. Maybe
Mhm.
it's my childhood bias, but I loved reading him growing up. We had the entire collection of all these short stories and poems, and I just read it when I was like 10 years old, I think, 9 or 10. Blew me away, blew me away. But there's the one thing. It's like you said. It's like a punchline. Like the one thing that works really well in the best Edgar Allan Poe short stories, and just stories in general, you could say, but especially in a short format, is the payoff.
Mhm.
You need a good payoff. You need that person to turn around and it's death and kills everyone. You need the desperation of not being able to get your loved one from the back from the dead. Like you need something like that. And in we can remember it for you wholesale. It's just kind of like kind of giving back memories. Give him happy memories. What memories do you want of like you aliens and stuff? Okay, all right. But wait, the memories are already there. It's like why are there aliens now? You haven't mentioned aliens in the other 16 pages of this book. Why are you adding them now? What's the point? Where is this going towards? Nothing.
Maybe this whole thing is fake. Hmm.
Yeah. It's personally, it's not great. It's not
No.
great. Probably the second weakest book we could say we talked about on this podcast after the Bones and All novel.
I mean,
Um,
it's a stretch to call it a book, even, right? So I don't know.
it's a very short story. It's an actual short story for once.
Hmm.
I can
Yeah.
appreciate his fascination, with reality and fantasy that Dick has kind of toyed with multiple other stories as well. And like, what is real, like in an objective sense, in a personal sense. But it's what we can say is that we are blessed that this story exists
Mm.
because two madmen would go like, "Hey, we want to write a script on this," and those madmen are Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett,
Hmm.
and they wrote Total Recall, directed by our boy, our man, freaking Paul Verhoeven. And this is the fourth time we've talked about him this year. Between because we talked about Showgirls and The Invisible Man, The Hollow Man, sorry, on
Yeah.
Uncut Gems, and then we did Starship Troopers on this show
Yeah.
with you as well.
Yeah. So
And
yes,
it's
this is the fourth time I get to talk about Paul Verhoeven.
this is the Paul Verhoeven fan club now.
I
Uh,
mean, no shame.
no shame, man, no shame, because this 1990 movie is an absolute classic, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold
How
Schwarzenegger.
dare you? How
Just
dare you?
it's it's late.
How
I
dare
can't.
you?
It was unintentional.
Of all the
Uh,
world of words in the world to kind of just stumble on is the
Schwarzenegger.
Schwarzenegger.
I have to enter my Deutsch sprechen phase to actually say it better. In English, I just become a little like it's like I have a potato in my mouth whenever I speak in English. But if ich spreche in Deutsch, das ist sehr better. It also
So can
has
you like
Rachel Ticotin, Sharon's.
you can practice to say things a bit better. You can practice the way Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think he grunts because he goes like ow, ow, ow. So
Oh my god!
exercise your vocal cords and whatnot. Anyway,
And that
I
gets you in
bugged
the
you.
mood.
Sorry.
But yes, Total Recall starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Rachel Ticotin, Sharon Stone, Ronnie Cox, and Michael Ironside. Uh, it's a classic. If you're like I said before, like if you're here, there's a 99% chance this is the thing you've watched. This is why you're here. This is why you join because you love Total Recall, story of Douglas Quaid, just
Hmm.
already an improvement there, who's obsessed with going to Mars. And that's it's kind of like the beginning of the short story. He goes to recall, the memories are getting implanted, but wait, there are already memories there. Or what? He's a secret agent. Oh shit, there are people out there that want to kill him. He goes to Mars, he finds this woman that he kept seeing in his dreams, and he has to save the planet and give the people air, all this good stuff. It's like you know it, you've seen it, you love it. Jakub, what is your history with Total Recall, and why is this amazing?
Oh wow, these are two different questions, and I think they deserve two separate rants. So I'm gonna just start first with my history, I
History
suppose.
rant.
This is a movie I remember watching when I was dangerously young, almost too young to watch it, because I had it in my house on VHS, and I remember this was one of those that
Oh,
I can't remember how we got this, but it was a German release. So I like on the spine it didn't say Total Recall or anything in Polish or anything. It was just Die totale Erinnerung or something. So, and it was dubbed in German. So when I watched it for the first like 27 times, I watched it in German.
and this is how
And
you learned German.
no, I didn't learn much German. Like I understand more
Oh,
than I can say, and I can put on a kind of I don't know, quasi convincing accent when I want to. But um, what I wanted to say, like in addition to this, we also had Death Warrant with Van Damme, and that was Der Stahlhelm Faust or something. So it was like the Faust of the Fist of Steel. I think that's how it was translated to German. We also had Rambo 2,
of course, the best Rambo.
uh, AWOL,
What's
the,
AWOL?
Lionheart. So also a Van
Oh
Damme
yeah,
film.
that's oh yeah, you're right, you're right.
AWOL, absent without leave. And there's another one we had. Oh my goodness, why am I blanking on this? The Running Man.
Hey, another Arnold classic.
So yeah, so we had all these movies like they're just like on the shelf, and then I remember watching I remember like taping off the Terminator from the TV. Like my dad used to tape off these films. Like he had a collection of VHS tapes with just taped off stuff from TV because he just that's how he rolled, I suppose.
Yay.
Yeah. Um, so I remember watching the Terminator on repeat, and then watching like Twins and Kindergarten Cop and all these and just going through
Nice.
Arnold. Like, and my infatuation with Arnold continues unabated. Like, I'm not even ashamed of it. And then I picked this off the shelf when I was very young, and this just it was like Alien to me. Because when I watched Alien for the first time, no one had told me what this is about, what this could entail. So when you see like the breakfast scene in Alien, I had no idea, right?
Oh my god.
So similarly with Total Recall, like it starts very sort of weird way because like first time I watched it, I switched over immediately after 2 minutes because the guy's eyes are coming out of his orbits. I'm just the fuck's happened?
It's a spooky imagery, you
And
could
the
say.
tongue, and then but then like then next time I watched it, so I remember just closing my eyes at certain scenes, and then every single time I would just go a little bit further and further and further, and then I would still see these images because I would just go and it's like this is something I shouldn't be watching because it's really scary or it's really morbid or it's really disgusting and very sort of upsetting.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this movie is just full of full of that kind of stuff. But then for the most part, at least for I want to say the first half, it almost kind of tricks you into thinking that it's not, that it's just this sort of like North by Northwest sort of like a wrong man on the run sort of thing, right? And then it just goes into like a full-on bloody massacre somewhere, and then there's this mask that comes out apart, and there's this guy who has a mutant on his in his belly, and there's this taxi driver who has this fucking mutant hand, and all these mutants were just scary to me, and people are
Oh
losing their legs
no.
and arms. It's just the best. So I have a massive nostalgic connection to this movie. Just to cut this long story short, because I don't know how to speak concisely. This is just how I operate. I'm sorry.
That's what we want you here. We love the
so,
Jakub way.
so I have a massive sort of nostalgia itch for this movie. Like I can put it on anytime, even though it's I want to say quite forgettable if you think about it. Like I watch it and then I'll immediately just forget what's happening into it. I mean, maybe this is because I kind of know it almost by heart now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just an amazing experience. You watch it and you're just in it. It doesn't. It slows down for exactly one scene in the middle, where for what I call the red pill scene, right? Which is
Yes,
the original red pill, by the way.
it is. It is.
um, so, but other than that, it just snaps, and it's such a just out of nowhere, just out of this world experience, especially for someone who's never seen a Paul Verhoeven film, or
Ooh.
I mean, I have more to say about this, but I love this movie with every fiber of my being, and this is coming from someone who grew up with this movie. I grew up with Arnie. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just even though I know he's shit at acting, like he's not good.
Hey,
Uh,
he
like
works in the right places. You
well,
know.
he does, but then like like I watch this and I'm just like, how did like I admire this guy so much because the guy with the thickest accent in the world convinced the entirety of Hollywood and the world that his name is Douglas, okay, or Harry, or I'm not sure, or Hank, or so like
Or John.
or John, like John Matrix, right? Like
Yeah.
uh he's I don't know what he does, but he can like with this big pile of muscle can convince you that he's an everyman, and he kind of just pulls it off. And I don't know, I just adore this movie. It's so good. It's amazing. And then we can get into all sorts of details, but I'm gonna shut up now. So I'm gonna leave it at the sort of first question for now because like I've spoken for like I don't want to say 3.5 days now. So like Nicolò, I don't know, take over.
Thank you. No, no, I love. I always love hearing like history, especially when it comes to Arnold, because we all love Arnold here. We're two. You're probably the biggest Arnold fan that I know, honestly, outside of myself. And I love that. Like, yes, someone else appreciates it. Damn it,
Why do you think
Kindergarten
I'm going
Cop,
to the
best
gym?
movie. It's also get the Arnold physique. just to come in heaven every time you go to the gym. That's
Those
the trick
pecs.
to
Those
get the
pecs.
pecs. Um, but yes, no, Total Recall is a similarly nostalgic movie for me because I loved Arnold growing up. All the class. When I say all the classics, my parents showed me the family-friendly classics, you could say. So we watched Kindergarten Cop a bajillion times, and Twins, and Junior even, which is not one of his
My hands
finest
are so
movies.
soft.
Honey, I'm pregnant.
Honey.
Uh, it was cute for a 6-year-old or 7-year-old. I don't remember how old I was. Um, but then when I
So ahead
was,
of its time, by the way.
yeah, yeah, very progressive. When I was in eighth grade, they were doing an Arnold Schwarzenegger marathon on a TV channel where like every day would be a different Arnold movie. I think it must have been in the summer because were the only days where I could watch movies at 9 p.m. because we could show them at that time. It was like 4.5 hours long with all the various advertisements and publicity breaks. And one of those movies, among those, I watched Terminator for the first time,
Nice.
Terminator 2.
Nice.
True Lies was actually, I've already seen True Lies multiple times. That's a childhood classic. But among those movies, Total Recall. And I had the exact experience that you had where it just starts off. I was like, what the fuck? What is this? But then, oh no, okay, it's a dream. It's a dream. It's not real. It's a dream. It's a dream. It's just this head exploding. Just small shout out to the practical effects and prosthetics and animatronics in this. They are amazing. Like if you think about the fake Arnold head in Terminator 1, it's so
Mm-hmm.
fake. It's so fake. I mean, again, it's a low budgeted movie. James Cameron did the best he could, but you can tell it's fake. In this movie, there's a lot of prosthetic heads. They're
Mm-hmm.
just upsetting. With all, like the eyes just leap out of their orbits and go back in. Amazing. Anyway, I watched it. I loved it. It was like my movie that year. It was like, this was amazing. Like Terminator 2 can get the fuck out of here. Now this is where it's at.
It's
Why
for
are
little
people
kiddies.
it's for little kid. And I remember like going to a friend's house. I was like, yo, man, it was this really like Total Recall. It's amazing. And like his mother was very, worried. I think I was very, ahead of my time in terms of the movies I was watching. Um, I don't know. I think I was the dangerous kid that would watch, like horrors when I was 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I corrupted this kid, poor man. And he's my best friend now. So, the friendship hasn't died, thankfully. Anyway, I love this film. I love this film. And even during the pandemic, I had this Arnold marathon with a friend of mine when we were stuck in the UK, in the student residence. And we watched Total Recall again. I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I love so many other Arnold movies, maybe for different reasons. Maybe I think like True Lies is just the childhood movie for me of Arnold in terms of action movies. Conan the Barbarian, I think, is just on a whole other level of just epic scale and scope of just a rock opera. But Total Recall is just fun. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it's 2 hours long. Doesn't feel like it. It's legitimately one of those movies you put in and you cannot take your eyes off of it.
Mm-hmm.
It just moves constantly. Like in 20 minutes, you're already at like, oh my
It's to
god,
the
Arnold,
beat
it's
of
what
drum.
is being and Sharon Stone is trying to kill him and he's running away and fuck. And Paul Verhoeven is just a genius. Like we've talked about him endlessly at this point, but just you mentioned the violence. The way this movie is just so visceral with the violence and unapologetically bloody and just uncomfortable is glorious. There are so many movies where you see people getting punched in the face, where it's a bruise.
Mm-hmm.
You see scenes in movies where like the hero escapes, where he's like, I'm being tied down, and just like punches people and escapes. In this movie, no. When Arnold has to escape, he's going to break off everything that he can and just stab people in the neck and with blood squirting out of there. It's ah, Paul Verhoeven, bless you, bless you. I'm so excited to delve deeper into this movie because it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Jakub, what makes it great? What makes Total Recall such a more fulfilling, interesting, and thought provoking experience than the Philip K. Dick story?
Oh, because it's fun. I think it's a simple fact, right? Like when just but by the way, before I forget, when you said no prosthetic heads, the scene with the prosthetic heads when it's like, how long are you gonna be here? 2 weeks, and then right there's this sort of scene, and then the head comes apart,
It's
and
amazing.
there is Arnold's. I think there is a prosthetic head underneath it as well, because it kind of looks like he
Yes,
has this sort of movement, like the sort of head from the Terminator scene when he's
slightly,
taking out his eye. Yeah,
slightly rubbery. Yeah.
yeah. So, but this is the first time I've seen this movie like 100 times, and this is the first time I noticed that you can actually see it's a prosthetic head. But then I watched,
Mm.
but this is the time I watched the remastered version of it, which is just the best.
The
I like
colors,
it.
man. The colors.
The
Oh,
red of
it's-
Mars is. I know Mars is yellow, but Jesus,
but at the time it was red. Red
it was
planet.
red. It's just the best. But to answer your question, I think the main. I'm some. I want to give props to Ronald Shusett and Don Bannon, Dan O'Bannon, because you can. I don't think I'd be able to take this short story that Philip K. Dick wrote and expand it into something like this, into something that cooks. It's a story that has a compelling set of stakes, a character that you want to hang out with, and
Mm.
an intrigue that's interesting, a plot that doesn't really slow down, and it's sort of, and it still keeps the conversation. It still remains sort of married to this gimmick of, is this real, man? Or is this real life? Like this sort of meme from like the early 2000s, where just had this little kid who was just still knocked out of from his dentist visit. Is this real life? So, because it's just phenomenal when you think about it. It's just put together so well that it just, I mean, I don't want to say it gaslights the audience, but it kind of just like tricks you into things, just because he goes into this place, recall, right?
Mhm.
By the way, the best scene he has in the movie, when he go, because he's I think in the book he's some kind of a clerk. I can't remember what he is. Like he's some kind of an
He's an
accountant,
office worker. Yeah, yeah.
an office worker. Yeah, but he's just works with a jackhammer, which is like the best choice for.
You cannot hide Arnold inside an office. Imagine just Arnold, big as Arnold, like Mr. Incredible with a suit on. Just
Hey Karen, what have you done to the toner, to the printer? And it's just Jesus. It's just now, and you just imagine him wearing a
you're
suit and
average Joe,
tie.
You're average
It's
Joe.
just like he's just an average Joe. But then he's this sort of like working class superhero, right?
Yeah.
Because he has this jackhammer, and this is just, I think, so whoever came up with this, like, give this man a jackhammer, because when he's holding it, his muscles are all trembling, and you can see how much of a pile of meat he is.
You
It's
feel
just
the
the best.
power.
But he could see that in this, like, this scene, I love it because it just comes out of nowhere, and it's purely for exposition reasons. In there, and he goes like, and he just stops, and he goes like, Harry, hey Harry, Harry, have you heard of recall? And he goes like, recall, recall, recall.
So that's not the jingle, man. That's
And he
not the
just
jingle.
fucks up the jingle, by the way. Like, how difficult? It's like, it's recall, recall, recall. It's so easy. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, so I think I heard somewhere before, someone mentioned that maybe this was a possibility that at the time when they were shooting the scene, they
They
didn't
didn't
have the
have
jingle. So they're just
I
like,
love
just say
that.
something. Recall, recall.
It's very New York, It's Rico, Rico,
It's
Rico.
just very Italian. But then it kind of goes into these sort of. I think what makes it great is the fact that it doesn't really pull any punches, right? Because it goes into this. He goes into this place, and then on top of the fact that it just gaslights you into things, like, is this real or is it not? But it doesn't really just draw attention to itself. Oh, Blue Sky on Mars, that's a new one. Or, oh,
Yeah.
here's this woman we saw in the opening, right? In the dream that he has. Okay, so you kind of start just thinking, what's happening, right? So he has dreams. So it's like the concept of deja vu, almost like just deja vu. Or anyway, but then it
Yeah.
kind of goes into this, like he has to go on the run, and then because Harry comes to get him, and then he says, "Oh, you fucked it up, Hauser," or whatever. It's just like, and then he dispatches them in such a brutal and uncompromising way. And this is at a time when I haven't seen RoboCop, by the way. This was my first Verhoeven, I think,
Same actually. I was checking. I was like, yeah, this is definitely the first one for me.
because I remember seeing RoboCop 3 first, and then I went and
Well, it's the
saw
kid-friendly
RoboCop.
one.
And then, yeah, exactly. I saw the kid-friendly one. Just like, this is amazing. Can I watch
There's
the
an
first one? And it was just like, when they go and take his arm off, like, and just like, anyway, we're not here to talk about RoboCop, but even in the beginning of RoboCop, when you have to sort of like, well, drop your weapon, he drops his weapon, and this Ed 209 just massacres a guy
It's like
because
90
they put like,
seconds of
yeah, just 90 seconds
squibs.
of just squibs. And then in here you have the same sort of this squibathon begins
Oh,
immediately, right? And he just has this scene in there which I never forgot, where he just has this muscle memory of, he just takes these people and takes these people out, and he just I don't know, just twists the guy's arms and shoots through him, and you can see these
oh yeah.
squibs just and they look so real. It's just mind-boggling to me. And then it comes to another scene, this another chase where there's bystanders everywhere, and then people are shooting, and these people are dying every left, right, and
He
center, and he
uses a
just
human
grabs the guy
shield.
and uses him as a meat shield, right? And it's
It's
just,
amazing.
I've never seen. I mean, granted, I was like probably 9 or 10 maybe when I watched this, and then I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like it since.
No, nowadays you have to, oh, we're having the massive fight. In a desolated area, all the people have left the city, they've been evacuated, no civilians around.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get to the remake where you have the same sort of concept, this sort of
Uh-huh.
crowded place, people are shooting and no one gets hurt. So this is what I think makes this movie great, because
Oh yeah.
it just
It's nasty.
it's
It's just
not
nasty.
it
It's
just
just
makes it a
dirty.
little bit more real and dirty, even though it's a little bit fucked up and not and unreal at the same time. It's
Yeah.
upsetting and morbid and a little bit. It's kind of like a nightmare, where in the
Yeah.
moment you feel it's real, but if you actually look back and examine what you're looking at, you know it's not. And then that, I think this is the key for me, where you can take this little story, this little what about essentially a guy sitting on a park bench and just imagining stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, because you don't know, uh, into this sort of North by Northwest sort of James Bond in reverse, about this guy saving the planet, and then you're realizing, oh, this probably is still not happening anyway. But you know what? I'm I don't care. This was just the best. I don't know. Yeah. So I feel like this is it. This is the thing that kind of makes it great. Is the sort of the Verhoeven sort of, I think, element of this, where it
Yes.
kind of makes it, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, if you listen to the show that we're doing every Friday, tactile.
Hmm? Absolutely. But also it's not so serious. That's something that I always love about
Yes.
Verhoeven. It just takes the piss out of everything. And honestly, like the movie has a lot of funny moments, but this is
What
like
have
my
you been feeding
fourth
this thing?
time.
Blondes.
I think this is the first time I've seen it, or fifth time maybe even, that I've watched this movie. But like in the opening section, there are so many funny cuts and just instances of humor that maybe they're not funny the first time around, but just revisiting it, the fact that Arnold is in his home just kind of watching the news, and he's like, the terrorists on Mars and people are dying everywhere and there's constant conflict and it's horrible, blah blah blah. And then he just turns off the TV and turns to Sharon Stone, honey, why don't we go to Mars? just
And
just
he's like,
yes,
oh yeah,
looks like a great place. Or even after the scene with at work, where the guy's like, oh yeah, another man went there, I don't know,
you
he
gotta
was
let himself
lobotomized.
lobotomized.
It's like, oh yeah, it doesn't sound like a good place.
And
Cut to
cut
he's
to, he's
entering.
just going there. Yes.
It's so good. It's so good. But
Oh,
it's like, is
great.
this man just a big dumb idiot or what? It just doesn't care. It's like, yeah, let's just do this. Um, but that's the Verhoeven touch you mentioned. It's just like, and you're reading the story, and it's like so dull. It's so flat. There's no characters. That's the other thing. There's no characters. Here, people actually feel they're cartoonish. They're exaggerated, but they feel alive. The
There's one
world
person who
feels
feels
alive.
alive. Well,
Who's
Arnold Schwarzenegger's character feels alive. The rest is kind
yeah,
of like, they're kind of cartoon villains, right?
yeah,
And
intentionally
sidekicks.
so or not? Is it? Is it not?
Because
Which
they're all
actually
figments of his imagination.
is because that's honestly something I've always wondered. Do you think this is this is a clear-cut case of it is entirely fictional, it is entirely in his head, or not.
No, it's not, because I've seen this so many times that I can see where it's either just a screenwriting mistake or an intentional. I don't want to say it's intentional, but if it is, it's genius. Dan O'Bannon again. I don't know what she said, because there are moments where you see, if it was all fictional, that I think the concept would then sort of prescribe that you'd have to see everything from the guy's perspective.
Meanwhile, there are scenes, yeah.
There's immediately a scene where I think he goes and sits in the chair, and then there's this sort of cut to intercom that's on mute, and this woman goes, this woman goes like, and he just,
There's a
oh,
problem. There's a
come in
problem.
here, come in here, we have a problem, and then he goes like, you blew my cover, you know, but then you have this sort of brief few seconds of being elsewhere, so you're not in his headspace anymore. So okay, so are we to assume that this is just happening? We're just assuming it is God's eye perspective over the real world, or this is just a mistake, or this is purposefully gaslighting me, even though like we just have a God's eye overview over someone's nightmare. And
No.
at this point, you know what? I don't mind, because I'm strapped to the guy's shoulders, and he's just kicking and screaming, and then all of a sudden he's shooting people, and then he's out, and then you're just like, at this point, and he goes home, and his wife tries to kill him, and she kicks him in the nuts twice.
It's so painful. That's another Verhoeven thing. Just lots of nut shots.
It doesn't have a unisex bathroom though.
No
So
bathrooms in here, I think.
but what? Yeah, I suppose. So to me, this is like, I don't necessarily care all that much that whether this is all fictional or not. I could,
Hmm.
I could, I could have a conversation leaning one way or another, and I would be happy either way. Because, and then the reason is because the experience always takes me. Like this, as you said, like this movie's 2 hours long, and then every single time I put it in, I'm just like, oh, I didn't know this is 2 hours long. Oh well, and then you're just like, you snap out of it. Oh, I suppose there is blue sky on Mars, and here's the credits. I guess so. I don't care, because the story, the whole idea of the sort of wrong man on the run, and just how funny it is, and self-aware, and sort of almost self-indulgent in many places, and how bonkers mad it is with its violence and gruesome sort of imagery as well. You don't care. I don't care about all that much, because it's like, it's such a thinly sort of drawn gimmick that you don't even care. But because I think if you actually slow down, I think you could take it apart and say like, well, you could say, well, if you squint this way, it works that way. If you squint that way, because it works this way, because it's really full of holes. I just
There are lots of holes, lots of scientific inaccuracies as well, and the like. You're the scientist here as well, so you probably notice more of that than
oh well.
than me and the average Joe.
Like the
Um,
whole dome on Mars made of glass, and there's people with guns shooting. I'm just like, why? Like, does this happen often?
they're just used to it. Or like the fact
It's
that
like,
the core of Mars is made of ice, and if we boil it up, it's going to release the air to the people.
yeah. I'm just like, well, in all fairness, I mean, unless, because this is alien machinery, because I'm looking at this. If you boil it up, all you're gonna do, you're gonna have, okay, there's gonna be this sort of whatever this atmosphere of Mars is made of, and water.
But
Unless this alien machinery is just taking water apart into oxygen and hydrogen, in which case,
but I think this is kind of weird and doesn't make that much sense
I don't
because
think
it is written
anyone
by
did.
the people of Recall, and they're no scientists. They're just writing the story, the fantasy for
Yeah,
Douglas
exactly.
Quaid, and this is what we're seeing up on screen. I think that's something I never really focused too much on, like what's real and what's not. The first times watching the movie, it's kind of like, I take it like, is it real? Does it matter? It's like the ending. It's kind of like, does it matter? Just kiss me because this is great. I feel great, amazing. We've saved Mars. All
Kiss
the
me before I
poor,
wake up.
yeah, all the poor mutants that have telepathic, psycho, whatever abilities. They've been saved as well. There's some racist, anti-racist elements in this film as well, which are very
Mhm.
very nice, very Verhoeven as well. Um, well, watching this time around, I kind of wanted to kind of like, okay, where do I lean on this? Is it real or is it fake? And I do think it is fake, because even though
Yeah.
there's like, even though, yeah, you're right about the jumps, because we do see Michael, we follow Michael Ironside like in 3 or 4
Like
separate
he has
scenes.
conversations with Ronnie Cox, and it's just like clearly Douglas Quaid would have no idea, right? He has these phone calls. Like, why does he know?
But it's just, it's the fantasy. I think it's just the power fantasy of being a hero. It's kind of some, it's kind of a remnant from the short story that is present, because in that one it's like he was the hero who saved Earth, because when he was a kid he was so nice, the aliens decided to not attack the planet. It's kind of like this element kind of comes back, the fact that he has this fantasy of,
Hmm.
want to be a secret agent and everything's different, and it's such an amazing experience. I also find it fascinating that this whole ordeal of the secret agent stuff, it's way cheaper a trequel than the 2 weeks holidays of like memories. it's, a,
Hmm.
it's interesting. But anyway, I think it's kind of a testament to the power of cinema, to the power of just stories in general. How they can be, they're fake, but you just get lost in them and in the details
Yeah.
so much that in the end it doesn't matter. You get to the ending and you feel like the hero of the story. You feel fulfilled. You feel like everything was for a purpose. Like
Hmm.
we get to the ending, we are all Douglas Quaid. We're just like, we know it's a fake movie, but in that moment it doesn't matter. It just feels good.
Hmm. I mean, there are elements of this where you can actually, like nerds on YouTube would just write video essays to kind of prove that this is fake.
It's a two
Like
and a
the
half hour essay.
yeah, like there are these moments like this of the alien handprint that's left on the thing that he has to press. It fits exactly his hand. It's just perfect. Like it's a perfect fairy tale if you think about it. He gets the
Yeah,
princess at the end, and then there's blue sky and on Mars and whatever.
the fantasy
So
people are alive and saved.
yeah. So it all makes sense as like the fakery is probably the most sort of obvious here, which kind of makes it more interesting because like just as you mentioned, I had this sort of similar feeling on this rewatch. It's just like this a film about filmmaking? Is this a film about
Really?
storytelling, about the sort of like the wish fulfillment fantasy that, or is our yeah, or just dream, or our dreams, our memories are basically us being filmmakers and making movies of the stuff we'd love our lives to be like. Because if you think about it, this is his Douglas Quaid, which is much better name by the way than Quail. It's just not
Sounds
much
like a
in,
bird.
like the two things they changed, the title and the guy's character, already better, right? um uh when you think about it, he's this guy who just lives this shitty life. He's like, he just wishes he could do something with his life, but then instead of uh actually going to experience it, he imagines it. So he's essentially a storyteller.
Mhm.
So he's a writer or he's a filmmaker. I don't know. So he essentially, Douglas Quaid is Paul Verhoeven here. He's running this film back in his own head, and because there's no way in hell you could do that. You could go on Mars and then say that your visa is for 2 weeks, and then just dismantle this whole arrivals hall, and then just I suppose lead to a few deaths because some people would be just sucked out of the room. Yeah.
And so in this case, like Mars is the United States and Earth is the Netherlands for Verhoeven. It's kind of like dreaming of going there. Just like I
Oh,
would like
possibly.
to live
It's
my life here, and
oh,
go have
this
this
is
adventure.
it is Mars is Hollywood, right? And Ronnie Cox is
Hey,
like Harvey Weinstein.
he's the king of Hollywood.
He's Joel Silver or something like that. He's the
And the
king of
power
Hollywood.
fantasy is that Paul Verhoeven brought the blue skies in Hollywood, but instead he didn't. He
Yeah,
tried, he tried. Was this
yeah.
this was like the second movie he made, right after RoboCop in the US?
Well, he did Basic
Correct.
Instinct, I
Which is
think.
after.
Oh, after that. So it was, I think, RoboCop and
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Actually, yeah. Like
That's the
Flesh and Blood
second.
was mixed
But Flesh
American
and Blood,
European
yes, it
production.
wasn't. It wasn't a Hollywood film, I don't think.
So much nudity and sex and rape in that one. Fun
Well,
times.
Basic Instinct isn't innocent either. When you think about it,
I love the fact
and
that like
Showgirls.
Sharon Stone was in this movie, and originally she was supposed to have like a nude scene, and she was like, "No, I'm not doing this. I'm not that type of actress, Paul." 2 years
He
later,
goes
on
like,
Basic Instinct.
"Hold my beer," right?
But, she's great. We haven't mentioned any of the other cast pretty much outside of Arnold. But do you like them? What are some of your highlights, favorites?
Sharon Stone is just, I don't know. She has this energy. I really like her.
It's
I
very
mean, maybe
chaotic and very evil,
I mean,
delightful.
yeah, honey, we're married. Consider that a divorce. It's the best.
Amazing.
But no, the way I mean, she looks very 90s, right? Like she has, but I
She's
don't know.
practicing tennis in her
She's practicing
in her
tennis
apartment.
using essentially a Xbox or like Kinect
The
or
Kinect.
um,
Ah.
which is just ahead of its time. But I'm just thinking to myself, with how Sharon Stone looks, and then what Rachel Ticotin looks like, and also another Uncle Jim's connection because I think she was in Con Air. Uh,
She was. Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, she
And
was in
Men on Fire as well.
and Man on Fire. So there you go. Sorry, it's like they both. It looks specifically in the sort of the female characters, or the how actresses are kind of characterized in there. They look very 80s. I don't know if you noticed this. Like Sharon Stone is kind of this sort of this 80s vamp.
Yeah.
Because she and then but yeah, she's lovely, but then again they have these like weird scenes, which again this is so uncomfortable because it's Paul Verhoeven, where I think in the beginning he just like Arnold just wakes up, covered in sweat, goes like, "Oh, did you have that dream again?" And then she's and then he's trying to kind of just, "Whoa, let's just have sex," and then she doesn't want to, and it kind of looks very rapey for a half a second because he's so big and strong, and she goes like, "Oh, fine then."
She's so tiny
Yeah,
compared
yeah.
to him. So
It's just,
incredible.
but then you kind of disregard it somehow because for some reason you're still buying into this horseshit idea that he's an everyman. Like he's just like, oh, he's just like me, and his arm is the size of my leg. But yeah, I really like Sharon Stone. I like, and Rachel Ticotin was someone that I really paid attention to, and then I was just like, can I watch any more films with her? And I didn't quite know, and for a very long time I thought that she's the same person who was the lady in The Running Man, but she's not.
That's the other Maria. She's
Maria,
the one from
is it Maria
Conchita
Conchita
Alonso.
Alonso? Yes.
Who's
Is it?
also in like
Yeah.
Vampire's Kiss, and
Yeah, but they looked alike to me when I was younger. I remember, but then yeah,
they do look very alike, honestly.
I do like him, especially that.
Hmm.
I suppose I mean, fair enough. They don't have much of their own agency, even though like Sharon Stone comes out of nowhere and she just kicks ass for a second or two. And so she is genuinely dangerous, but then eventually they're just one of them is just a henchman or a henchwoman, and the other one is a sidekick, right? So they're essentially just she's like one's the prize, one's the princess that he has to get, and then the other one is essentially a henchman of
The dragon.
henchwoman of Lord Farquaad, right? But yeah, I like Sharon Stone. Sharon Stone has this sort of steamy sort of allure about her, man. And then at that point I had not seen Basic Instinct. That came later in my life when it's just
That
like,
would have been
wow,
way too early. Imagine like a
like what's
9-year-old
this?
Jakub.
It's just a little 9-year-old Jakub's just like, oh, birds and the bees right there.
Mommy, Daddy, do you use a nice pick in bed?
No, he's just like, mommy, do you wear underwear? Like, oh, it's just okay. No, this is just oh goodness. Anyway,
I
yeah.
absolutely love Michael Ironside in this.
It's
Because
hard not to.
he becomes the head henchman, and it's amazing in here.
See you at the
He's
party,
so
Victor.
upset. He's so upset through the entire movie, and he's always looming there in the background, ready to strike. He has this unhinged energy to him that I've
Because
always
it's his
loved.
wife as well.
It's his wife as well. He's married
Yeah,
to Sharon Stone.
whose idea was it? Like it's just like, oh, let's put Hauser back on Earth, and then you replace his memory, and then you're gonna be his fake wife. And it's like, hey, it's my wife. No, like she's gonna go there, and it's just like he's gonna bang her. Yeah, she needs to keep her cover, and he's just like Like, whose idea was it? Like, this guy Cohagen is just clearly out of his mind.
It's like the other guy in the car. I'm sure she hated every second of it. With
Because
big, bulky Arnold.
if you've ever seen the remastered copy of, or at least the Blu-ray copy of the Terminator, you know that he's packing.
It's packing heat right there. Red heat. No, it wasn't. Ah, it's
Like what Joe Rogan says, like look at him, he's so big and muscular, like he has a baby seal between his legs.
yeah. Yeah.
Ah.
No, the only other thing that I want to say about this movie is it's just a kind of a weird side note. We both love music and singers, but for some reason, like the soundtrack starts and they're like, "Ooh, Basil Polidoris." It
Mhm.
just opens like Conan the Barbarian. There's like the same
Yes.
like deep drums, dum, 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 dum. And then it just goes in a whole different direction because, of course, it's Jerry Goldsmith.
Mhm.
Strings galore. And it's like, oh, it's Terminator again. It's just
Mhm.
keeps repeating himself. But it's a good soundtrack. It's good. It's just a very well made. Like every aspect of this movie is amazing. The matte paintings, the miniatures, the production design. Like so well made.
I mean, you kind of have to just like if you think about it, like I'm in awe of how much expansion this little short story one liner got, because there's this spy intrigue. There's this guy who finds out that he's someone else. There's this sort of weird oppressive government on Mars, and there's this
Hmm.
guy who just, I don't know, he has to make time to go for cornflakes for some reason. He says, "I'll be home in time for cornflakes." What a great thing to say. So he's really, I think he cares about his cornflakes, but there's this sort of idea of this sort of class divide. There's this sort of dystopian world that these people
Hmm.
live in. Um, and then on top of that, well, it's somewhere in the background, there's this sort of, there's this alien architecture that these people discovered. So there's this sort of like almost like 2001 remnants of something like, well, there's this sort of ancient civilization that we just stumbled upon, and then we're just trying to figure out what the hell this means.
Probably the only undercooked element I would say of the entire script. It's kind of like the
But
alien angle. Listen, like it's just there.
well, but that's what makes it good, actually, because if
Oh yeah, yeah,
now in 2022, if they did it again, this would be just a
yeah.
whole 20 minutes of exposition, and there'll be a whole intrigue, and they'll probably meet them, and it's just
Total
but
Recall Prometheus edition.
well, you laugh. I love Prometheus, but
I love Prometheus as well, but that's sort of like obsession and the interest of like, but how? It's like if there's anyone in the world who thinks I. I'd like to know about the aliens who went to Mars in Total Recall before the events of the movie.
which
That'd
is
be
just the result of the
boring.
Marvelification of sort of cinematic entertainment, because it's all about the plots and all about world building and lore. It's never about character. And people will tell you it's all about the characters, man. No, it's not. It's about plot and world building. All this is the people care about. The
No
big picture,
emotions.
and the big picture, and going from A to C to D to B to Ed to whatever. Right? I don't know my alphabet, but so I'm happy where this is just a little sort of nugget of something you can scratch your head about for a second, and then imagine it's like, look, it just feels like this world's bigger than it is, but no one really pays attention to it, and that's
Mm,
what I call as a successful world building. This is the world building that, like, the big guys in fantasy writing would do. They would just invent a big word. I mean, I don't think anyone invented, but they would, like Tolkien invented a language, a mythology, and then the whole mythos and everything, just legends and whatever, and wrote a children's book about it.
C.S. Lewis as well,
This is the biggest flex, right? But then, so for me, this is sort of like, I like this sort of world building in here, where this just like they just talk on the trains, like they look at the mountains, like, oh, this is where the mines are closed because they found this horseshit. In now, this will be just, oh, we need to pay attention because this is gonna come back, and then someone's gonna talk about this a little bit more, and this is why it's gonna be 3.5 hours long. But here it's just an afterthought, and I think it makes it better because all of these things, like this whole dystopia between these sort of mutants, they just tell you it's like, oh, cheap domes, they were all exposed to radiation. Now they all look like they're just a little bit odd. or they look like some people in the makeup department will have some extra work, right?
Yay.
So, which is just great. The makeup work is just disgusting. I mean,
Ah,
but
it's
yeah,
touching. There's a little kid, little telepathic kid.
yeah, but
It's like,
and
oh, it's
then
super cute.
it's quite cute because like this woman and the kid, they just look at them just and just like, oh, they look all right, and then like they just turn a little bit and just like, wow, okay.
And even then, character Arnold is very sympathetic and very supportive. He
He
like
just
gives
gives her
money to
this
the
little
little
like he
girl.
rubs her chin or yeah,
I'm a thought, how did you do that to the little girl? Just gives her
yeah.
money. It's like, yeah, it's nice. He's a nice man. He's very cordial. He doesn't kick the old lady that's trying to steal his suitcase early on in the movie. Just
No,
like,
no.
he's a gentleman.
It's just, I mean, still, I mean, we haven't even talked about how just like he wears this towel. He looks like an absolute bag of ass,
It's
and
amazing.
then just this woman just tries to take his suitcase and just tells him to fuck off, and he bows.
Thank you.
just,
It's
it's
all
just,
little moments that other movies we'll get to it very soon, but other movies don't have, and those are the moments that make a movie great. Like all
Mhm.
things that you could easily cut, easily, or
Like
simplify.
the Johnny Cab.
Johnny Cab, Robert Picardo.
Like I wanna send an email to Elon Musk and say like if you ever come up with this sort of like just commercialize these sort of self-driving taxis just for shits and giggles. I want a Johnny Cab.
Just a
Just
limited edition.
limited. I mean, he'll probably go like this is amazing. Let's do it. uh, but yeah, like these like just coming back to these like big concepts are kind of just these big world building concepts are just dressing. Like you see this in the beginning where like oh there's a revolution, there's a resistance, Quato lives and whatever. This kind of looks like it's organic and lived in, and then
Hmm.
you kind of brush shoulders with this sort of resistance for a second because you see the Quato guy,
Yeah.
but it almost like it doesn't matter because because this guy's still being chased and he still has to say because it's all about saving the princess essentially, right?
Yes, yes. It's
And
the
then
power
he's
fantasy.
yeah, so I like this kind of storytelling, this sort of world building that where you can just it's almost like you're driving a car through a beautiful landscape. Um, so like you're driving very fast, uh, and then there's this beautiful landscape around you, but you still have to pay attention to the road. But you're aware that you're in somewhere beautiful. I don't know this if this makes any sense.
It,
Like
it does make sense, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Like when you're
that's
in
kind
a
of how I
country
see it.
that when you go like in foreign countries for a holiday, it's
Hmm.
just their life has been going on for years, and you don't know anything about it. Maybe it's just like I don't. Okay, cool, signs and things and protests. Okay, interesting. And this is probably why I didn't like the short story, because I was actually expecting these elements to be there, but that's not
Hmm.
the type of writing that Philip K. Dick does
No.
for short stories primarily. It's like, oh man, like I was expecting, elements of, of the racist angle of like, supporting this minority and give the people air.
Come
Some of my
on,
favorite moments.
give them air. Give the people air.
Which again, another massacre. So other movies wouldn't have had that. There is just like these
He just
soldiers
switches off the air
massacring
and these
like
people just start dying off like
prostitutes.
flies.
Oh my god. Yeah, but like I was expecting these elements. I was not expecting just the most like surface level bare bones story from
Hmm.
Dick. It was a disappointment. And thankfully at least, he gave us this movie. Which is
Hmm.
just a massive delight. But it also gave us another movie 22 years later, which is 2012's remake of Total Recall, directed by everyone's favorite journeyman.
No.
Questionable. Okay, Len Wiseman, written by Kurt Wimmer and Mark Bombach.
Gerd Wimmer, that sounds familiar. Did he do something that we talked about? Oh my
It did,
goodness.
it did.
Is
Equilibrium,
it Equilibrium? That's it.
which is a very Philip K. Dick like story,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Set in
and
a
this movie
concrete jungle of Berlin.
Street Kings. Um, but this movie stars Colin Farrell, Kate Beckinsale, Jessica Biel, Bryan Cranston, and a couple other familiar faces snuck in there. Um, this was my first time watching it. But this wasn't for you, Jakub, right?
No, I've seen this
Hey,
before.
go
So
for it.
I knew what I was walking into.
Oh,
And I promised I would watch this because you were like, maybe we should drop this. I don't
I
know.
was like, when we talked about the Haunting of Hill House, I was like, yeah, the Haunting 99 is not a good watch. I don't want to force anyone to watch that. But you're a soldier. You take this seriously, and it's like, no, I'm
Since
doing it.
you're not a coward.
I'm not a
What would
coward.
Arnie do?
Arnie would watch it twice
Possibly, yeah. It's all about
and just
reps.
laugh at it. Look at what they made. I made a much better movie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is what you would say. Like, my movie was much better than this.
What's a Colin Farrell? I ate it for breakfast. Anyway, Total Recall, Jakub. What do you think about this sweet remake?
I don't think I saw it in the cinemas. I think it was either a DVD watch or something, or maybe on Netflix. I don't know. At some point, it was a few years after it came out. I remember it coming out because I remember seeing posters, and I was just like, I don't really want to see it. But then,
No, thank you.
no, thanks. I'll sit down. I'll wait. Thanks. But I saw it later on, and Len Wiseman remind me, like, this is a guy who did all the Underworld movies, and I think he did
He made the first two Underworld movies, and
Die Hard 4. He did.
He did, and that's it.
And so and he's married to Kate Beckinsale, I think, or he was at least.
Was. I think
Yeah.
she's with Martin Sheen now.
With Martin Sheen? Really?
Wait, no, the guy, the British guy, right? No, Michael Sheen. Fuck, Michael Sheen. I keep miss.
I mean, she
I think
likes
I
them
said
all.
it. I think
Jesus.
there's been another instance where I said Michael Sheen instead of Martin Sheen and vice versa. And they keep messing them up. But people always kind of like smile, like, yeah.
Mhm. Martin
I'm
Sheen,
sorry.
by the way, he's a guy who. Have you ever seen him put on a jacket?
No, maybe?
He has the best way of putting on a jacket. Like, it's. I think you can see it quite well in.
Departed?
Oh, he does it in the Departed. He does it in West Wing, and but in the in
I've never seen
Badlands.
West Wing.
In Badlands, he has this. So he has this sort of like denim jacket because he puts it on, like, how do you put on a jacket? Like, you just, I don't know, you just, I'll just go around and then put one
That's
arm,
how you do
the other
it?
one, and then just correct. But he will just fold it, and then you just do it in one move, just like this. Like, just
That's how
hold on.
children's do it, for instance.
When we finish this, I'll find a YouTube video because there are people who are just just obsessing over to see how great he is in putting on jackets.
It's like a compilation of putting on jackets.
So anyway, Len Wiseman, I watched Total Recall for this show just to see if because I didn't like it when I first saw it. It just bored me half to death.
No
So
surprise there.
I thought to myself, you know what, it's gonna be a good opportunity to kind of revisit to see, maybe I changed my mind. No, I didn't.
Oh, this is not a mini Uncut Gems episode now.
No, but I'm just thinking to myself, like, is this an Uncut Gem sort of double bill of like remaking Paul Verhoeven, where we could do just this and from 2014 do RoboCop?
Oh, I still haven't seen that one either, actually.
It's not good either. So at least I didn't like it. I saw it in the cinema and I was just like, wow, this is great. I mean, there's one concept in the new RoboCop which is like, Paul Verhoeven would have used it to such a great extent because they gave RoboCop an actual, like, human hand, as in, like, he has a fleshy hand, so he has a full body robot with a face, and then he has this hand that's just, but the hand is numb, and so it's numb and cold, and it was just like, just people were joking on like podcasts, why did they do this, so he could jerk himself off. It's just, yeah,
It feels like someone else.
and it feels like someone else is doing it. It's just like, like the big sort of teenage trick of sit on your hand for like 30 minutes and then do it.
It's like, it's not worth it.
Anyway, Total Recall. It says,
After
hi
the
Randy, like,
needlessly horny-
Randy's already laughing at me, just being a complete, like, Jakub's a needless horny input.
You did it this time.
Good,
We
goodness.
didn't
Anyways,
even mention the free-boobed lady. Shame
oh
on
yeah,
us.
we didn't. No, just which is arguably one of the sort of memes of the original film was the three-boobed lady, and then the guy goes like, "I wish I had three hands" or whatever. I mean, there are some other memes like, "Oh, you have," what was this like? You have the cheek to show your face in here, Hauser. Look who's talking. Yeah, the movie is a walking, talking meme. But
So many
just
good quotes.
unlike the 2012 film,
Unlike.
I want to say I watched this now, and I'm asking myself a question: why this film exists in the first place? And my
Mm-hmm.
cynical answer to this would be maybe the rights were lapsing. Is this 20 years or something like this that they have to do something, otherwise we'll revert to someone because they optioned it, or I don't know, and they had to just make something happen and just didn't really think it through. And then as a result of this, they just said, well, we're kind of still on this in the tail end of this sort of adapting Philip K. Dick early 2000s sort of kick, because I think, and then Minority Report came out and a bunch of other films, and I think this film kind of wants to be a little bit like Minority Report, visually speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And but I think
Yeah.
it's also kind of benefiting from the fact that J.J. Abrams came onto the scene. I think this is kind of the biggest sort of visual inspiration for this is J.J. Abrams' Star Trek.
2009. Yep.
It-
Yeah.
uh, and then I feel like this is kind of like if when Tony Scott was a guy who would like I don't want to say inspire others, but then other producers would probably tell journeyman directors kind of, can you do it like him? So you'd get people like Simon West or Michael Bay.
Yes,
Even
that's a good
Michael
one. Yeah.
Bay was one of those guys who kind of just started their careers on the back of uh borrowing a
Be a Tony Scott.
yeah, borrowing this aesthetic from Tony Scott, right? So, and I feel like J.J. Abrams would be sort of the Michael. So what Michael Bay was to Tony Scott would be just a successful borrower of a guy's aesthetic. J.J. Abrams is to Spielberg, and then
Yeah.
then
That's
Len
true.
Wiseman is Simon West in this equation.
That's a good one. Yeah.
So Simon West is a guy who borrows Michael Bay's aesthetic, which is
Mhm.
twice borrowed already. So it kind of feels completely visually uninspired and dull. Like it feels like it's a movie made by, but made in the think tank, like in a sort of boardroom somewhere where they say, "Oh, have you seen this new cinematic trailer for StarCraft 2? Can we make a world look like this? Or have you seen this? Can we have cars like in Minority Report?" So it kind of is
They're
like this
flying.
patchwork. Yeah, they're flying, but they're not really. And then whatever. Oh, do we have to do it on Mars? No, we don't. Can we just do it can we have this sort of gimmick of, because let's just say like this whole film just disposes with the idea of Mars, right? It's Australia versus Britain, and they have a train going through the Earth's core, which is
Yeah,
just
the
ridiculous.
United Federation of Britain or something, and then it's the colony.
And the
That's the poor
yeah,
people live in the colony. The rest of the world is just a nuclear wasteland,
yes.
uninhabitable.
Yeah. So I don't like this movie one bit. I think it's boring. I watched it in 6 installments, like 20 minutes at a time, because it really bores me half to death. It stars Kate Beckinsale as well, right? Who's who lives for longer than she should.
No,
Like if you think about it, like she should just get a bullet in the head like Sharon Stone did like halfway through the film.
Colin Farrell didn't file for divorce. You know.
Consider that a divorce. I don't know. And Colin Farrell, I mean, I don't mind the guy. I like him, but you know, this is, I mean, maybe the biggest bane of this film is that Paul Verhoeven films still exists. Like it's not like the Nazis burned it, you know. so so
That's one way
so
to put it.
so it's not like it's been erased from existence that you don't know that you could have it like that. Because it feels like it's just totally just neutered, very sanitized, very tame. There's, well, comparatively speaking, it's almost disrespectful to actually say like, "Hey, oh, there's no violence in it, there's no stakes, no action, everything's kind of, you can feel everything's on a green screen, everything's kind of like these people are not touching the floor half the time, I shit you not." Like it feels like you're watching a cinematic trailer from, and let's just say late 2000s game where they had this sort of technology to insert a character into the cinematic trailer, into the cinematic cutscene, so you can feel like this character is kind of like in the armor that you accrued across the multiple missions that you've already been on.
It
Like it
carries
feels
over.
like this character does not belong in the scene. So it kind of feels like all these characters, they don't belong. It feels like this. Oh, can we have these guys look like robots from iRobot? Oh, can we have the cars to look like the ones from something? It just
I
feel
robot again.
iRobot again, yes.
This looks similar.
Or can we have this sort of, can we borrow a conceit from Attack of the Clowns or or
Oh
something, and
yeah,
then
that's a good one.
and then kind of again a little bit from iRobot. Like this movie actually owes a lot to iRobot when you think about it.
And very little to the original Total Recall.
And very and weirdly enough, it doesn't really owe a lot to the short story. It actually
That's hilarious.
is like a beat for beat remake of the film, and it almost kind of just forgets that it's a that still there's a short story somewhere in the background, and then
But
yeah. So
I
I'm
love
gonna
this
leave it there.
one.
I don't like the film almost one bit. I don't think I want to see it ever again. And then you've told me, oh, there's a director's cut. Do you want to watch this? No, no, no. I'm fine. I watched the
But it's,
theatrical cut. I think it's because it's like 20 minutes more of this crap. No,
yeah,
Bryan Cranston's garbage, by the way. Anyway,
ouch, ouch. I
I'm
think
not
one
a
of
fan
the.
of this, by the way. But anyway, we'll get to
Oh
it.
no, 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 no! I'm not touching that. I'm not touching that right now.
So
um,
intense every single, I mean, we talked about this on like many occasions. I think I was on Clappercast when we were just talking about Godzilla, and I was just like, people didn't get me when I was just saying like he's always on, he's always just like, he can't just exist, like he can't just chill, he's always, how there, what would you say about, I'm just like, can you please, like he always like enunciates like he's trying to just like, you're not on the stage, like people can hear you, like you don't have to be very vocal. He's very good about at beating confessions out of people. Like he's like in Godzilla, I need to see my wife.
I think
He's just
Bryan Cranston
so
has the
on.
right level of intensity. I think he just has to be directed well,
For
because
what?
like in this movie, is always in like the. You watched Breaking Bad, right?
Yes, exactly. He's just, who do you think you see?
But that's the thing,
I am the
it's
one
not
who
always,
knocks.
it's not
Yes.
always like that, But in
Oh,
this movie, it's always like on the same wavelength of like, I am the danger, just like
it just
the evil mode activated. Um,
he always
but
feels like he speaks with his clenched teeth. Like he's just
and he's just
anyway.
always awfully too close to other people's faces when he speaks,
I
just kind
can
of
just
like to
feel like
impose
it's just like,
himself.
you had a garlic ciabatta for lunch, did you know?
Just sniff it
And
up.
anyway, I'm
Mm,
gonna leave
mm,
it there because
mm.
this is a rabbit hole. Anyway,
Um, I loved reading up like little interviews and things from this movie and the making of and whatnot. And this is also written on Wikipedia, but I love that like Jessica Biel defended this as like, this is not a remake of the 1990 movie. This is a new adaptation of the short story.
she read
What
it.
her character does, well, on the pooper in between takes probably as well. But I love that like her character is not in the original short story. So right, like of all the people to
Like
say this is an
nobody is.
adaptation, like nobody else.
Laurie
Um,
is. Sorry, Laurie Quayle. Quayle is.
quail. I actually for which also again like they kept the Quaid thing instead of going back to quail.
Oh yeah, because it's not a because it's not a remake. It's a readaptation of the story, and they also they kept the title that Dan O'Bannon changed, and then they kept
Of course,
the name change.
of course, because it's all name recognition for
Of
something
course,
that, to be fair, is was popular, but it was never that successful. Like it was a moderately large hit, but I think I don't know, but like
Total
personally at
Recall.
least, on a personal level, I can say for like at least I want to say people of my generation that were the target audience for this movie when it came out. Total Recall was not a name. It was not just a movie people knew and watched.
What, the
Um,
original?
the original, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
It
honest
was.
to
I mean,
God, I've
oh,
met very few people that
because at
have
the time it was
seen.
like it wasn't this like the highest grossing R-rated film ever.
Was it really?
Because it made like, I don't know, like $250 million like in 1990. That's a lot of money.
Well, maybe. Anyway, when this I remember this movie coming out because it came out in 2012 when I was going to the cinema almost weekly. I was watching so many movies on the big screen, but I remember just seeing the poster for it. I was like, it's kind of like he was like, I love the original so much. I don't want to do this. I was also very anti remake, something that I haven't been in the past few years. It's something that I've outgrown, thankfully. But I had always had a strong bias against just the fact of remaking a movie was bad for me back then. So it was like, no, don't touch Total Recall. I'm not watching it. So this was my first viewing, and of course, I was like, let's watch the director's cut because I can. It was the version available. I was like, let's watch it with 15 extra minutes and the one beautiful cameo by Ethan Hawke. Uh, it was not
Who,
worth it. It was not worth it.
who is he in there?
He plays the original Hauser. There's basically this one scene where, bear
What?
with me, bear with me. Basically, let's get
Is it
into
at
it.
the end
Basically,
when he just wakes up? He's just like, oh, it's all a dream.
no, halfway through, there's like the massive. He meets Jessica Biel, and there's this long ass chase scene with the cars and whatnot, and they
Yes,
manage to escape, and they go to an apartment to lay
yes,
down for
and
a
he plays the
second.
piano.
He plays the piano, and there's an hologram that appears.
Yes,
I
it's
honestly don't know how it goes in the theatrical version, but in the director's cut, the hologram kind of like removes a mask or something, or goes like, "I am you," and it turns into Ethan Hawke. So the original Hauser, the real Hauser, was Ethan Hawke.
oh, it doesn't do that. It just cuts off. He just has a conversation with Colin Farrell in there.
Colin Farrell as himself, like,
No, no. So he's just, oh, I see you've seen the whatever, like you found the key and whatever that means. That, like it's all. So Colin Farrell lays down the facts to him and then just cuts off.
no, no. Here is like a 5 minute conversation between Ethan Hawke and Colin Farrell. Was the old Hauser talking to Quaid slash new
So
Hauser?
why is it different? Why is it a different actor then?
I don't know. I don't know. Oh no, why is he? Why is it not Colin Farrell? You mean?
Yeah.
Because they changed the identity so people didn't know it was him, and they could hide him in plain sight. Of like, and then we give you this fake wife, and all of that. Which is an interesting wrinkle, I guess. Because if you have this person, like especially someone, you could say, if you're a massive, massive nitpicker, you could say like Arnold is easily recognizable. So if someone was like, "Hey, that's Hauser," if they knew him somehow
Because
from like pictures, I don't
the
know.
anti spy, like a spy should be a gray man, right? Like mid height, mid weight, brown hair, brown eyes, completely forgettable. Not a hunk
Yes,
of
yes,
meat with a dick to his knees,
and the
with a
massive.
massive thick accent as well. It's like, okay, it's like, can you describe him? I don't know, just average build, average height. No, no, the big muscular guy with a thick accent.
And regular guy is Colin Farrell, but this movie, it's not that I didn't like it, but it just gave me nothing. This
Mm.
was just empty calories. It took so long to just again. I watched it similarly to you, like in chunks of like 30 minutes at a time, and it felt endless. I wasn't hating it, but it's just I kind of like what they did with the production design. It's way more of a, like you said, it's a mixture between the clean sheen of a Star Trek 2009 mixed with Blade Runner. It kind of wants to be that.
Oh, the
Um,
shanty towns of the colony are kind of inspired by it now.
Yes, I want to say it was originally supposed to be called like New Asia or something, and then they changed it in the script because it was a bit
Hmm.
offensive. I understand that was just weird, like New Age and it was just like it was
Is it not
funny. Like,
offensive this way? Like with all these people with these sort of like Japanese umbrellas and
yeah, I
it's all in
guess
Australia. So I don't know. If you want to get offended, I suppose you can get offended. In which case, you're just like
representation.
Jesus Christ, just sit down.
Yeah, yeah, get a life. Why are you defending Total Recall 2012 people? Chill. Thankfully, no one's doing that. But yeah, it just gave me nothing. I think the only things I really liked about this movie is just kind of like Len Wiseman is not a bad director. I'm not a big fan of Underworld, but like he knows how to shoot movies. For coming out in 2012, this doesn't use the shaky cam aesthetic. It could have, but at least the action is cleanly shot. It's not exciting. It has a couple cool moments, but it's generally very clean. It's the polar opposite of what we talked about. The fact that not only just PG-13, but just everything just looks so shiny and bright and white. It lacks the texture, the tactile nature, like you said,
Hmm.
of Verhoeven's direction, and just those sets and the practical. Even though there's more practical effects than I was thinking actually, and then I was expecting in this remake. But yeah, it just left me cold. It just
Hmm.
goes on forever, and it's. I mean, the version that you watched is just as long as the original, maybe like 2 minutes longer, something like that. It's just as long as the original, pretty much.
It feels much longer though.
It feels much longer, yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially with the extended cut. But w-
So
no,
I applaud you for actually just doing this, because this is just, for me, this is
you know,
torture.
it is 15 minutes longer, but again, you get some Ethan Hawke. I like Ethan Hawke. I was like, yeah, it was cool.
But
It was
does it
cool.
make the but does you know what? Does it make it feel like, it was worth it? No, it doesn't.
No, I mean, it's probably just worth it to watch the scene on YouTube, or like you watch the thumbnail, and it's like, oh, cool, Ethan Hawke is in the movie, and then you just don't watch the scene as well. So like
Jokes
that's
on
more
you,
than
it's
enough.
not.
Oh, it's cheap. Yeah. What? Will you briefly touch on it? Why was this made? What was the obsession with just not even just Philip K. Dick adaptations, but just remakes in general, which kind of actually fits in with Colin Farrell's career because I forgot that just the year before this, he was in the Fright Night remake, which I've heard good things about. Have you watched it?
I haven't seen it. No.
I haven't seen it, but I've
No.
heard good things about it. But like, he was kind of in this small stew after after recovering from his various addictions and kind of starting a clean plate after with the way back and horrible bosses and Fright Night and this Total Recall. Like he kind of restarted his career again. What was the appeal? Why did they make this? Like, what's the point? And we could say that about any remake, but why in 2012 did they want to make a Total Recall movie? What do you think?
At this point, I want to put on my like, just be like Leatherface and put Randy's face over top of mine, and then just pretend I know,
Go with
pretend
the
I know
facts.
half as much as he does about this stuff, because the guy has like, just listen to Uncut Gems. Like, Randy has these sort of ideas about why things are made, which are just brilliant.
The
It's just, so shout
Randomeister.
out to Randy. Like, Randy's just the best. Um,
We love you, Randy.
so I wish he was here to, because I hope he would.
We tried. We tried.
I hope he would say something that I'm about to say. I hope,
They would say that this was worth it because of Kate Beckinsale, which is
possibly,
the
because
best part
but
of the
he has a
movie.
man crush about her as well. So it's
I
just
don't
like,
blame him. She's a good actress. She's kind of like and though I like her, she's kind of a better Mila Jovovich.
well, I don't want to derail this, but I think the allure of Kate Beckinsale is
The
sort
nose,
of, she's a she's a fox. She's a middle-aged fox. Like, if you know, I mean, she
cougar,
not a cougar, no, no, but she's kind of
not
like,
yet.
she doesn't, I don't know how old she is in
She
there.
was like 36, I think,
Yeah,
even
so
younger.
it's just about
Yeah,
my age, right? Like
yeah.
now, right? So you watch
Beckinsale.
someone, and then, like, I don't know, people would be. So I suppose Randy would
She
be
was
then just
39. Wow.
I think they may be like similar age. So this
Yeah,
explains a lot,
it fits
because,
actually.
like, when you think about it, when you're like in your late 30s, you'll notice that you'll be just like, you wouldn't be really like, you'd look at like women who are like 25, you just think about them as children almost. It's like, what, Jesus, like, they would look, she just looks like young, like but Kate Beckinsale has this sort of allure of someone, like, she's a woman, like, she knows what she wants. She's lived a life. She's a few wrinkles here and there, but
She's aging gracefully. Yeah,
she's got
to
it.
this
Like,
day.
she's still
Yeah.
got it. Like, it's not even that she's still got it. She's just got it, right? So I get it. I get it, Randy. I get it. Okay, on to the topic of the day. It's you know why this film was made. I want to say two reasons. One is the Philip K. Dick / sci-fi kind of tail end of, let's just keep adapting science fiction from the 50s and 60s, because it brings us money. And then there's the remake, sort of, let's remake stuff from the 80s, because at this point, I want to say Darren Aronofsky was probably just about still attached to RoboCop, or something like that,
Oh, that would have been fascinating, actually.
because he was attached to RoboCop, and I think
Wow.
briefly, I think Neil Blomkamp was attached to it as well, or maybe he had a separate idea later on. I don't know. But then there was this time where people started remaking successful films from the past, like en masse, right? So
Hmm.
if you looked at blockbusters, it was all remakes, reboots, and sequels. And part of the reason, in my opinion, is the credit crunch and then the Great Depression comes starting in like 2007. All of a sudden, like people stopped going to movies, so budgets shrunk. People didn't have much money to actually go and make movies, so it became riskier and riskier to actually make blockbusters, original blockbusters, so to speak, right?
Hmm.
So people started banking more on Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, Transformers 3, 4, and 5, and 6. And then let's start remaking stuff from 30 years ago, or just if you want to be precise, probably like 29 years ago or something like this, because this just seems like this is a sweet spot between 20 and 30 years ago. It's just not too long ago that it's still out, that it's already out of the zeitgeist, and you just walk into something like, is this a remake? I don't know. Like The Thing was a remake and no one knew, right? Um, um, and then and it's been long enough that there are people who would be passionately going like, you can't take this seriously. Look, like they're this, sacrilege. They will be too old. so, so I want to say it's a combination of these factors, that there was just this sort of massive shrinkage of resources, and then people were just like, oh, if we don't have this much money and we still have to make money, we have to bank on something that will probably sell. So you either bank on, you have to bank on properties that people will be aware of somehow in Hollywood, right? So some of them would be, okay, let's just keep churning these. Like one of the reasons why 80s were a decade of sequels was because of the same reasons. Like like Chimino almost bankrupted United Artists, right? Like so the excesses of the new Hollywood came to a crashing halt, and then people were just like, well, we need to kind of just
Recoup
keep
costs.
just keep reheating because we need to make money. And then so it was difficult to, I think Tarantino would tell you, it's like, this is was a decade of they won't let you do it, right? Because it's too risky, it's too risky, too provocative. It has to be right down the middle, right straight down the middle of the road, right? Which is, if one of my favorite quotes from They Live, middle of the road is the worst place to drive. Anyway. and it, so I think Total Recall is part of this, especially in the wake of Star Trek being a massive success. And I think at that point, I want to say maybe like Star Wars was, I think, being sold to Disney.
It was at the end of 2012, I think, or something like
I
that. Yeah,
think
yeah,
so. So it's kind of still the same sort of time scale of just these folks taking movies from. I think 2012 would it be just about when they were just doing another Die Hard, I think. Maybe it was just
The
early 2013,
You Have a Good Day to Die Hard 13. Oh yeah, January. Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's very early on, yeah. So
We
these
had another
films,
Underworld movie that year. Speaking of Kate Beckinsale,
yeah. So if you go on, like, I don't know, let's just say 2012 in film, right? If I Google this, and
Django Unchained.
top highest grossing films, right?
Yeah, go for it.
The Avengers, Skyfall, The Dark Knight Rises, The Hobbit, Ice Age Continental Drift, The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2, The Amazing Spider-Man, Madagascar 3, The Hunger Games, that's the only original film, and Men in Black 3.
What?
9 out of 10 are already existing properties,
No,
right?
no, no. The Younger Games is also based on a widely popular YA
Oh yeah,
series, so
that
it's not
so
even fully original.
there you go. 2011, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, Transformers and Dark of the Moon, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, The Twilight Breaking Dawn Again, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, Kung Fu Panda 2, Fast 5, The Hangover Part 2, The Smurfs, another original film but based on an existing property,
Yes.
and Cars 2. 2010,
Oh,
Toy Story 3, Alice in Wonderland, arguably, you could say this is the wackiest of them all. If you think
it was
about it,
number two.
it's number 2, like
Fucking hell!
worldwide gross, like billion
What a
dollars it made.
time!
It made a
What a
billion dollars.
time!
Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows, Inception, that's an original film, right?
That's the
Shrek
only one
Forever
probably.
After, The Twilight Saga Eclipse, Iron Man 2, Tangled, okay, uh,
Ah,
Despicable
yeah.
Me, original, How to Train Your Dragon, right?
Also
Uh,
original, yeah. But they are all
yeah,
children's movies.
yes,
The original ones.
Yeah,
I love
so
how every single year Twilight was in the top
2009
10.
you have Avatar, which is original. Again, Harry Potter Ice Age sequel, Transformers sequel, 2012.
Twilight sequel.
2012. uh 2012
2012 is a
another
classic.
Twilight, Sherlock Holmes, and then Angels and Demons, another sequel, and The Hangover. So you could see that there's
Yeah.
this. I want to say this is my theory that starting in 2007, 2008, and 8, when the world came crashing to a crashing halt because people lost their houses, lost their jobs, people didn't have money, so the economy shrank. So okay, recalibration happened, and the people started making these movies. It takes 2 3 years to make a movie, and they start coming out in like 2009, 2010, 11, and 12, and then you have this sort of big sort of peak, especially after you get sort of early confirmations. Guys, it works if we start making sequels to stuff that worked, and we start remaking stuff that used to work in the past. People come to see this, and that's
And
why it
this Total
exists.
Recall was written in. They started working on it in 2009, so it tracks, the three
Yeah,
years.
I feel it tracks, and if you actually then add the elevator pitch of this, we could probably make it look kind of sort of like iRobot or Minority Report, which were, I want to say, immensely successful in their own right. I don't think iRobot was a bomb. Let me just check.
Oh, that was a big one. I remember even watching it in the cinema. I think when it came out, I was very young. I was like
Yeah, I
seven.
feel it was a success. Like $350 million, clearly a success, right? I mean, it cost 120 to make, but still. So the early 2000s sort of, oh, let's cash in on this, and then let's hire someone who kind of, because I think you said, oh yeah, well, it doesn't really utilize the sort of shaky cam aesthetic. I don't think it does, because I think it wants to be Spielbergian in iconography. And then Spielberg, apart from Saving Private Ryan,
He's
never
always
really
been, yeah.
sort of adhered to it. And even in Saving Private Ryan, he did it for a purpose, right?
Yeah.
There is a reason to why he's doing handheld cinematography in Saving Private Ryan as opposed to everything else.
You
So
also have Colin Farrell, who's a connection to Minority Report.
there
He
you
was on
go.
this movie.
So I'm telling you, this is the reason. Like, there's just economy shrank, and then people were just like, let's cash in on something that we know is gonna be bankable. So we're just increasing the odds of this thing making money. And I think it actually did make money.
It made, on a budget of 125 million, it made less shy of 200 million.
So just
So
about probably broke even, right?
with the marketing
May
and stuff, yeah, because it
Probably
was very
didn't break
aggressive.
even.
I remember they were pushing it quite hard on
I mean,
TV.
probably didn't break even actually when you think about it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which is understandable. I
Sorry
will
for
play
ranting
devil's
again.
advocate for us. No, 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 no. I love these things. Like, to play devil's advocate for a second. We had this conversation briefly with Ewan and Carson when we talked about The Haunting of Hill House.
Mhm.
They weren't big fans of the TV show on Netflix one, which I was actually
I
surprised
still
by that.
haven't seen it.
Oh, I love it. I love the TV show. But one thing that I especially admired is that there's no point in making the same shit again. And Mike Flanagan just went in a different direction. And something that I will commend the writers of Total Recall, the remake or readaptation, whatever they want bullshit to name it, it tries to be its own thing. That's probably the best thing I can say about it.
How?
In terms of, like, it's not, they're not going to Mars. They're not following, the only element that they're taking is the basis of the story by Philip K. Dick, which is also the basis of the Arnold version. Man, memories implanted. Oh my god, the memories were already there. People want to kill him now. Man on a run. That's it. And
I
there's
disagree.
the problem that I have. Wait a second, I'll get to it. Wait a second, I'll get to it.
Okay, I'm just
The,
yeah.
I like that. I like the idea of, there's the fall, this kind of like method of transportation that in 2 hours and a half it goes like through the earth right next to the core to kind of move people in this massive elevator from the UK, from the United Federal Union of Britain, whatever, to the colony and back again. Like, it's a cool idea. I like that. Even aesthetically, it does try to differentiate itself from the original. But, and there's a big but, it also wants to be a remake of the original, and it follows the plot beat for beat. You mentioned it
There you
earlier,
go.
and I agree. And that's where it loses me. Mike Flanagan takes the story by Shirley Jackson. He takes the haunting of 1963 and he does something completely different. It's still about ghosts, it's still about trauma in some way and psychological torment, but it's a completely different story. In this one, they go, "Ooh, let's make it different because it's not about Mars. It's about the colony, and there's like nuclear waste in the world, and there's a resistance fighting the thing." Okay, yeah, but also like we still have this bad guy who's at the end of everything, and he implanted this guy under everything, and it's a double agent, and he has to discover his own identity. Oh, okay, I guess. Yeah, and the wife is out to kill him, but now she's in the entire movie, not just in a couple of scenes. She kind of just like amalgamation of Sharon Stone and what's his face, Michael Ironside. I was like, okay, I
Could you
guess
imagine just Sharon Stone and Michael Ironside in one? It's just
that's a deep fake.
m- middle. I want to see a deep fake sort of AI sort of rendition of this with just this male pattern baldness on.
I'm gonna create it on Dali Mini in a second just to see what happens. Sharon Stone and Michael Ironside, just Sharon Stone melted with Michael Ironside. Maybe I'll post the results on the Twitter if it works.
Whoa.
But but as I was saying, just that's where it loses me. That's where it doesn't work. It's just it wants to be its own thing, but also it's a slave to the original, to the 1990 version. Too many references, too many winks and nods. A couple of them cute, I guess. You know, there's a section where he is dressed up as like this bald man, but you see an
The
actress
lady.
that's the lady is just the same one as the 2 weeks lady. It's just like, oh look, it's gonna be him. Oh no, it's not. It's another
That's
guy.
the one that actually is kind of like, okay, that's an interesting sort of piece of homage. The rest is kind of uninspired.
It's a genuine Easter egg, I'd say, for fans of the original. But yes, it's uninspired. Uninspired is the best way to put it. And I think it started to lose me properly like 2/3 of the way through. Because earlier it tries to build its own identity, not really, but kind of. But then it just I don't know, it just makes turns into utter nonsense. Once Brian Cranston is introduced, not so much for the actor, but just like the character itself. Just this big baddie, and then you have Bill Nye for one scene because he's a friend of the director, I guess, due to Underworld.
Mhm.
Do we need it? Do we need it? Did we need this movie, Jakub?
No, we do
No.
not need this movie. This movie exists exactly because I think whatever studio made it, uh, Columbia, and distributed by Sony anyway, they needed money and they needed to kind of just make something fast and then make something that will make money. That's all this is to me. Because I think like when you say, oh, it's different. The only way it differentiates itself from from Verhoeven film is the fact that it just removes the Mars element and introduces the elevator through the earth score. But everything else is the same.
Because like lower class, upper class in a more literal sense with the elevator,
Yeah,
you could say.
exactly. So instead of mutants, you have essentially just Asians in Australia, and then you have this sort of
Yeah.
the elites living in London, which clearly they don't live in a paradise because they're just like a underground trip away from a nuclear wasteland anyway. So not the best place to be.
And even
Uh,
then, the passage of time is such a mess in this movie. Like, how do people teleport around?
It's just, I don't know. It's at this point I don't even want to dispute that. It's just, I mean, but this is a reason why I actually like how I realize why I don't like that I don't like certain films, because if I actually as I'm watching this can actually stop and start nitpicking these things, that means I don't care. I'm not invested, right? Because I'm pretty sure Total Recall from 1990 is full of holes, and if someone doesn't like it, it'll be just like, well, you can clearly see some, yeah, yeah. I don't care because I'm in there, I'm in it to win it, and then in here I'm not, and then to me this is essentially just an attempt. Well, it tries to be Spielberg, and it's very clean, very shiny, very white, and there's
you
sparks
know,
everywhere, but it's
they do a
also
good job. They do a good job, at least. Good effects, good sets. It's not a
it's
hack
a
job.
but then I'm just thinking to myself, this is a good exercise to actually understand what Paul Verhoeven brings to a story, because the story is essentially
Mm.
the same. So if you go Total Recall 2012 minus Total Recall 1990 equals Paul Verhoeven, like if you think about it, because they're
It's the
essentially this.
secret sauce.
he's the secret sauce, and then he realized that the secret sauce is provocative, and this is something that you can't really bank on in 2012 because these people really need money. So they can't restrict their audience pool, so they can't make it R-rated. They can't, God forbid, make it an NC-17 or X-rated, right? Or whatever the hell. I think X-rating doesn't exist anymore in 2012, so it's just NC-17 would be the one that probably Paul Verhoeven would get. So it can't be bloody, it can't be violent, it can't be gross, it can't be provocative in any sort of way. So all it has to just straddle again the middle of the road, and it has to bank on stuff that people will recall, pun intended.
Hey.
And then think, oh, this looks like this movie from 2003 that I watched with Tom Cruise and Max von Sydow and whatever. Or is this like the Will Smith from 2005? About robots.
Which even then they have a more distinct identity visually than this one.
Yes, because
This
this
feels
is
like an AI generated movie.
yes, exactly. Because it kind of looks like, well, it came together in a boardroom. It's just like, let's take this and that, and then if we add these elements together, then these elements will add to something that will make money. Like they look at these ideas mathematically, as in like, if we take 2% of minority report, 7% of this, then together we have 9% of this much money, and it just doesn't work that way. Because the movie just on its own is just pure garbage. Like it doesn't have an identity. Weirdly enough, again, pun intended, doesn't have an identity. Doesn't
It's
know
too
what it
much tied
is.
to the past.
It's not well. It's tied to the past in the weirdest of ways, and it actually looks at the. I don't even want to address this of like, oh, it's a readaptation of the short story. Clearly, no one read it, right? I mean,
Or they
fair
read
enough.
it and forgot about it.
Paul Verhoeven didn't read Starship Troopers either, and then look at again, like it was for the best. But like no one read the short story, and they probably didn't know what made the original film great, because they clearly just removed everything that what made it great, because they thought, oh, it's too risky now. So if you want to make a film, a remake of something that was made great by the fact that it was risky, then don't make it. Don't do it. Just leave it. You don't have to. Just put it back where it belonged. Put it back on the shelf. Because I mean, fair enough. The original Total Recall from 1990. I failed to mention this. That for me, this is a movie that's kind of like a sign of things to come, because it's almost like a change of guard movie. It's positioned right in 1990 because
It's the last 80s movie.
it's the last 80s movie and the first 90s movie, because it's like the sort of the Venn overlap of both sort of aesthetics, both sort of it's wild like a 90s movie, and then also gross like an 80s movie. So yeah, but this movie is just the opposite of that. It's just bland. It's just bland, uninspired, and boring. And that's the worst thing an action film could ever be, is
Oh, yes.
boring and
Yes.
uninteresting. And it also borrows so much from like Children of Men as well, with all these like, ooh, there's no aesthetic here, and just here's this sort of dystopian Britain again, right? Like you can
Where you
take
have a majority British cast that cannot use the original accent for some reason.
yeah,
Or
Kate
Irish,
Beckinsale
whatever.
does. Kate Beckinsale uses her accent, right? When she drops the cover, she has a British accent.
She does?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah, I think
notice
so.
that.
And then Bryan Cranston is just I couldn't imagine him doing any accent apart from just being intense.
Bill Nye has an American accent.
Yeah, and Colin Farrell has a vague Irish accent because he can't really
It's
hide it
just
very
him.
well.
It's just him, yeah.
Like you
Poor
can see
man.
that he's trying to hide it, but you know that he can't. Like it just comes about, and every now and again he goes like potato.
It's just a small leprechaun just walking in the background.
Yeah, this movie shouldn't exist. I'm sorry. Like I know this exists because Star Trek was a success, and they just thought, let's put these sort of lens flares in post, or because I'm pretty sure they put them in post, right? Like
Oh
you're a
yeah, it's
filmmaker, you
cheaper.
tell me.
Cheaper as
It
well.
doesn't look like they're achieved on set,
No.
especially
There's
the
there's
set
a
is a
few
green screen.
There's again. I was looking at it. There's more sets than you would imagine actually in this. Even a lot of the
Really?
robot stuff was practical. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jesus. It
Um,
doesn't look like it any. So it again a waste of money because it looks like a StarCraft commercial. Like especially these big set pieces, it kind of looks so early 2010s. It's just like this. It's like Man of Steel sort of destruction porn, and
but
it's
that's
all
cooler. I like.
meaningless.
But Man of Steel
Meaningless.
is more is
It's weightless.
yeah. But that's the problem. Is just making it PG-13. I think that's kind of like my final statement about this
It's
movie. Is
fantasy violence, is what it is.
it's just tiring. It's just so tiring. I don't want to see 2 hours of people running away from robots and Kate Beckinsale, even though she's the best part of the movie for me in terms of the cast. Because who else do you have? Like Colin Farrell looks bored. Bryan Cranston, you said is too intense.
You
Jessica
like
Biel,
him
one
though?
of those. I like him, but it's just I don't like his character in this movie at all.
I think he
Jessica
wants to
Biel,
just at some point he wants to whisper into someone's ear like very intensely, like, "I am the danger." Like he's just Jesus, Cohagen, calm down.
it
Like
was just I think this was this the year that Breaking Bad ended, I think, because it was like 2007, five seasons. I think this was like one of the first movies he made post Breaking
it
Bad
wasn't
or
5 seasons; it
close to
was
it.
six, right?
I was six.
Because there was last season was divided in two, and there was a one was a
Ah,
1 year break, I think.
that's a AMC thing, you know. I'm watching Mad Men right now, and like season 7 as well was split in two, but still.
I want to, yeah. Like I don't want to. Just at this point, we're like 2 hours in because like every time you get me on the show, like you're not gonna wrap it in 80 minutes. Like when Carson's in here, it's got like 45 minutes. We're done, right? But no, not with me.
Different people bring different things, and that's why we love it.
So it ran between 2008 and 2013, by the way. So you know,
I
I
was
kept
looking
telling
for
you, Breaking Bad was like last season was divided into two. It was like two eight
Breaking
eight.
Bad is
I
five
think it was
seasons, 62 episodes.
yeah,
But it
but then
was splitting. It was released like separately. But again, that's the
yeah,
thing that AMC does. Even with The Walking Dead, it has like a 4 month break, and then it
because I
starts
think
again.
this was longer than 4 months. Because I remember, yeah,
Sorry, maybe that a writer's strike as well happened, something like that. 2012, 2013. Yeah, 16
yeah,
episodes.
yeah,
Each of
seven
have 8
season
episodes.
five, yeah,
There you
August
go.
20. It was season five is split into two parts, each consisting of 8 episodes. Yeah, the first half premiered July 15th, 2012, and the second half August 11th, 2013. It was a year of of a break on a cliffhanger.
Jesus.
It was yeah, it was gross. Like eight, I mean, fair enough. Like the payoff of the last 8 episodes is pretty great. Like this TV show actually is pretty great if you think about it. As far as TV shows go, and I don't like TV like almost at all. This is a TV show that it was really great for me.
Breaking Bad was great because it had a vision, something that the Total Recall remake didn't have. On this
Nice.
sorry note, Jakub, the final question that I have to ask you: which is better? Which is better, the book or the movie? And if
Uh,
it's the movie, which movie? I know this is a hard question to answer, probably the hardest we've had on this podcast in over a year. Think hard about it. You cannot go back on your word.
well, at this point, I want to say the book. No. No, of course, there's only one. I mean, I don't. I know this is all about opinion. It's all a matter of opinion, but no, there's a correct answer to this question. There's one correct answer to a question, which is better. It's Total Recall from 1990, directed by Paul Verhoeven, written by Ronald Shusett and Dan O'Bannon, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and pretty much just wipes out the entire competition. It's just one of the most interesting films of its year, probably one of the most interesting science fiction films of all time. And at this point, I'm wondering, like, did I have it on my top 100 list? Probably didn't, and I probably should have. So it's just amazing. It's one of the best Arnold Schwarzenegger films ever. It's, I rest my case. It's just the best. And it's a Paul Verhoeven film. It's just unhinged, wild, and it's just this sort of fairy tale. This gross man is just whispering into my ear, so I get nightmares. And I did get nightmares out of that, more than one.
The best nightmares, man. The best nightmares. Yeah. Total Recall 1990 is cinematic perfection. I would honestly say it's probably a perfect movie in terms of like what should a movie do. Like this one sets out with a specific goal, it accomplishes it in spades. Everything else doesn't matter. This is an old timer. I don't remember if I had it in my top 100. If I didn't, I apologize publicly right now because it should have been on it. It's just great. It's just a great time. Just a great time with thematic depth. If you want to look for it, it's there. You can analyze it, Fantasies, reality, why we cling to all of those things. We've discussed it. But also, again, it's just fun. Something that both the short story and the remake aren't. Even though I would say for people that are on the fence a little bit, give the remake a watch. I would say try it out. Watch the extended cut because there's Ethan Hawke, uncredited cameo. It's just, the bias is strong for me. Um, but yes, this is it for this episode of the Death by Adaptation podcast. Jakub, where can our listeners find you on the webs?
Well, you can find me lobotomized in my bed, shouting "Rico, Rico." No, you can find me on
New
Twitter.
York Jakub.
Yes, exactly. You can find me on Twitter at talkaboutfilm. I'm not verified because I'm not gonna pay.
You're not gonna jump ship. I know a lot of people are
No,
kind of like, I'm deactivating Twitter, man. I'm going
No,
on
I'm not.
Instagram.
Really? Like,
Yeah.
no. Like, it's like these people who are just like, I'm moving to Canada when Trump wins. Like, Jesus, like, a lot of whining people. No one really moved, right? They're just like,
The moment you realize no one actually looks at the posts in the same way that they look at tweets,
yeah.
it's a different way of talking, man.
It's the
Just,
same. It's the same sort of like the thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Like it's totally gonna help to like these hurricane victims or whoever. Anyway, so you can find me still on Twitter. I'm not moving anywhere because
yay.
I don't care. Like like if but there's gonna be hate speech in there. Like it's already there. Like it's been there this whole time.
It's like you've never looked at the replies you get on posts. Like,
Yeah, I just
are
don't
you so
care. I
lucky
just
you never have hate speech?
if someone attacks me, right click block. I don't care.
It's like
It's
J.K.
just
Rowling is running rampant for years now.
it's just Jake and Rowling is harmless. It's just,
Uh,
she's,
uh,
well, she's not done anything wrong to anyone. She just has opinions, and that's what Twitter's for anyway. So you can find me there at Talk About Film. Also, you can find me on Letterboxd when I actually just pull my finger out and actually write something in there, and as
Tusk.
Jakub Flasz. Because it's just I have like a list of 100 films I need to put on Letterboxd. That's just like at this point I'm just like I think I might as well give up. But
Just log them, man.
I spent 49 quid on the Patreon in there, so I'm just like I might as well just put it there because it's just like these I don't know.
Change posters. I've
I
changed
could
the Total Recall poster with the Arrow release, the remastered,
Ooh,
the
can I?
artwork. It's a
Of
lot.
course I
Yeah, yeah,
can.
yeah.
Of course I can. Yeah. So you can
It's
find me
amazing.
there. Well, I'll put the Total Recall right up in there. And then you can find me on flashandfilm.com and also on Clapper. And then you can also listen to the show I run together with Nicolò and Randy, and then which is at Uncle James Pod everywhere and UncleJamesPodcast.com. And also you can listen to our bonus shows at patreon.com/Uncle James Pod, where $3 a month buys you access to everything. And there's quite a lot of stuff. And then if this is coming out at the end of November, and
It is.
if you are if you actually hurry up, you may be able to quickly listen to our Mulholland Drive episode of David Lynch Marathon that we have in there because it's still going to be available for free until the end of the month. So,
And
but
if
there's
it's
more.
not,
There's
honestly,
more.
just drop free quids, people,
Yes,
because it's
but
worth it. You get solid conversations that will
yeah,
keep you company for workouts, for household chores, for your daily routine. Uh, they're great. They're great fun. And we've also just released the penultimate episode of the David Lynch marathon. So if you're a Lynch head like myself, you can hear Jakub in pain having watched Inland Empire.
haven't watched it yet, but I can only assume.
Don't ruin the suspense and the surprise. They don't know we're recording this early.
Because people assume that people record podcasts like a day ahead.
This is definitely being recorded on the 27th of November.
Oh, so by that time you actually can't access Inland Empire because Inland Empire comes out on the 30th.
Oh, but so stay tuned for that then, because it's gonna be a great conversation. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Twitter still, but also on Instagram still, as always, at Nicolò97. You can find my link tree there with links to everything, as well as the Uncut Gems podcast, like Jakub mentioned, my YouTube videos, all that good stuff, as well as, of course, you can follow the Death by Adaptation podcast on Twitter and Instagram, just to know when the episodes drop. And stay tuned, because now we're in the final month of the year, December, and we have 2 special episodes. The first one, the good Johan Gledo, again, is joining me to do a weird crossover with his podcast Don't Listen to This, where we talk about Bob Dylan. So if you're a Bob Dylan fan, tune in for that. Thank you for listening. We hope you have a fabulous day. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we hope to see you soon. Bye bye.